we can afford to be interventionists and, oh, well, it's for the poor children. It's, America's great because America's good and all that kind of stuff. But when it's white farmers in South Africa, then all the journalists, then all the neocons, all the liberals, suddenly they become America first and say, well, that's not exactly our business in South Africa, right? So it's very convenient. When it happens to be about white people in peril, suddenly nobody cares. It's not our business. We should keep our nose out of it. But it's important to understand what South Africa means for our message and what we're trying to accomplish in our country. And of course, the reason being is because South Africa is what our country will look like in 50 or 60 or 70 years, depending on what immigration is going to look like. All these people who talk about demographic change, like myself, when we talk about the fact that in 2035 or 2065, America will be a minority white country, and we hear Time Magazine and all the other publications tell us, oh, that's racism, or that's prejudice, or that's simply white displacement anxiety. You'll just have to get used to it. Well, this came from Tucker Carlson, and it just goes to show how important it is that we have people like Tucker on Fox News. And so I do want to take a moment to do a little bit of a victory lap. This is something that I've basically predicted. That Trump tweeted this last night just goes to show that we've been right about Trump from day one. Vindicated completely. Everything that we said, possibly and more, Trump is doing and doing very well. And it just goes to show for all the people that said after the Syria strikes, well, it doesn't matter if it was Hillary, if it was Trump, they're all the same. Something like this goes to show they're not all the same, right? Obviously, they're not all the same. We have a president, we have a sitting American president who is acknowledging white genocide in South Africa. That's huge. Could you imagine? I mean, rewind the clock just 3 years ago in 2015. And who are the favorites for the 2016 election? Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Jeb Bush. Ted Cruz wasn't even a favorite, and he was the most conservative out of all of them. It was Foam Boy, Marco Rubio, and Jeb Bush. Those were your favorites for the Republicans, and Hillary Clinton for the Democrats. So in 2015, the most we could have hoped for was Marco Rubio, neocon. And instead we've got Trump tweeting about white genocide, tweeting about what's happening in Europe, what's happening in Germany, right? All that good stuff. So a clear victory lap. More than that, and I have to do it. I have to do it. People telling me on Twitter, because I tweeted, look, I'm basically the most prescient voice in politics today. And people are commenting, oh, well, don't get cocky. Like, yeah, you called it, but, you still have a lot of growing up to do, this kind of stuff. And it's like, I call something wrong. I do the wrong thing. I say the wrong thing. And it's all over the place. Everybody's reminding me of it for years. But I call it right every week, every day with like 100% accuracy. And it's, don't let it get to your head, that kind of thing. I think I've earned the right to be a little cocky, right? What was the whiteboard 3 weeks ago? Social media censorship, anti-white racial hatred, South Africa. Do we have 3 winners? 3-0? But anyway. So this came from Tucker Carlson. And I think this points to the point I've been making for weeks, what I've been talking about all week, another vindication. Personnel. It pays to have people. For all... I've seen people in the alt-right really getting nasty this week, really blackpilling after Beatty got fired. And we can talk about that for a moment. Darren Beatty, he was the speechwriter. He was one of the only tenured professors who predicted Trump would win and supported him. He was a speechwriter in the White House. He got fired last week because he had spoken previously. He spoke previously at the H.L. Mencken conference, and they said, well, that was bad because white nationalists also spoke there, so he got fired for that. And so the alt-right all week has been saying, see, this is what happens. This strategy of infiltrating the institutions, this strategy of not ruining your life going to rallies with tiki torches and polo shirts, that strategy doesn't work because we'll get people in office or we'll get people in these positions, And they'll still get ostracized. They'll still get ostracized if they bring up white identity. But clearly, that has been completely turned on its head in a matter of 72 hours when we see what happens here. When we see, even with the tiny infrastructure that we have now, the sporadic, disconnected infrastructure that we have now, I hesitate to even call it infrastructure. It's like you have some people over here and some people over there, and they go to like secret parties and secret meetups and things. So I hesitate to even call it, because it's really not very coordinated. It's not very coherent. There's not many people involved in it. But I said I went to D.C. and I met a lot of people, and it is coming together. But you see the value of that. When we have a president, when we have a guy on Fox News, we have people that are connected with money and people who are in the administration. You see how it pays to have even the 100, maybe it's 100 people that we have in D.C. that are working towards these objectives. Look at the disproportionate effect that it has. Understand that. Trump is one guy. Tucker Carlson is another one guy. These are two guys, and because of these two guys, how many people in the country now know what's happening in South Africa? How many people are talking about what's happening in South Africa and thinking to themselves, white genocide? Very interesting, right? So, I mean, we look at this tweet and we think about the impact that it has. Purely, divorce it from the content, the substance. Think about it purely in terms of the mechanics of this, how this is working at a logistical level. Tucker Carlson has a show on Fox. He talks about it. Trump watches Fox. He tweets about it. Millions, tens of millions, possibly hundreds of millions of people around the world now talking about what's happening in South Africa. That's two guys. Now, everybody cannot be Donald Trump. That's not what I'm saying. Everybody cannot be Tucker Carlson. But imagine, if you will, if we have people that are woke about these things, that know the score, that are writers in Tucker Carlson's writer's room, that are staffers in Trump's White House or in the Department of Justice or Commerce or Labor or whatever. Now, imagine if there's hundreds of people like that, thousands. And that's all it takes. It's a country of 330 million people. Imagine thousands of people who know the score, who are working in LA, in New York, in DC, in these positions of influence, and they play it close to the chest. They fly under the radar. When people ask them about politics, they change the subject, but there are guys. That is what is ideal. That is what I think we're looking at. Obviously, that's better than what we have right now. So I think, for starters, we look at this tweet and where it came from, which is Tucker, and we understand the importance of this tweet. That's the power. That's what makes it all worth it. For all these people that said he's cucking, it's not enough, it's not good enough. That's all it takes is one tweet, and he's done more for white identity than all these people combined for 25 years, right? So, and they say, well, but we talked about it. We're the reason he said it. But if he wasn't there to say it, it wouldn't matter. I mean, you understand the point there. So that's the tweet. It came from Tucker Carlson, and God bless Tucker Carlson. He's a godsend, and he's taking slings and arrows like crazy. You see the Vox explainers and all these other publications that come after him. They have this just flamboyant homosexual who does the Vox videos. I think he's like Puerto Rican or something, or Venezuelan. He's some, like mystery meat. And he comes on with his earrings and his glasses. He looks like a little chipmunk. And he's like, Tucker Carlson is normalizing white nationalism. And I gotta think, imagine what Tucker Carlson has to deal with in, the Fox News leadership. Imagine, Rupert Murdoch's kids, who are by no stretch like Roger Ailes or on board with what's going on in the conservative movement. Imagine having to explain that kind of thing to those folks. It's probably very difficult. I don't know how he has managed to keep his job, but he really is a godsend. He's doing great work over there. And I almost don't even want to say that, because that the parasites of the world like Jared Holt are going to be viciously writing this up in Right Wing Watch, I'm sure they'll go after him because people like me say this kind of thing. Evil neo-Nazi says Tucker Carlson is good, and it's all this guilt by association stuff. But he really is. He's telling the truth. He's telling it like it is. And people like Trump, Tucker, they prove all we have to get into those positions of prominence so that we can change the rules. You're not really going to be able to change things if you're just some crazy guy on a street corner with a sign. But if you're If you're in a position, if you've got resources, if you've got clout, different ballgame. So we're going to look at what's going on in South Africa because, of course, it begs the question, well, what is the situation there? You know, we've heard a lot about it. Trump has tweeted about it, and he said that he is asking the State Department to look into the South African land and farm seizures and expropriations and the large-scale killing of farmers. And so let's look at actually what's going on there. And we have to look at the genesis of it, of course. We have to look at the long history of it. South Africa was a colony of Great Britain. South Africa now is a sovereign nation, but then it was just part of the English colonial empire, and they said they wanted their colonial empire to stretch from Cape Town to Cairo. And so they had territorial holdings all the way from, and South Africa is the southernmost tip of Africa, from all the way in the south to Egypt in the north of Africa, in the Maghreb. And so we start out in South Africa, and in 1913 you have basically white people control most of the land because they are the colonial rulers, and black people do not. Then you enter into the apartheid era later on in the 20th century, and you have basically the same thing. Even though white people are in the minority, they still own the vast majority of the land. The black majority are restricted from owning land. They can only own land in certain areas. And so this is where all of this originates. You have to understand it originates with colonialism. So you have this very small white minority that descends from Dutch and English settlers in South Africa. And they had been ruling as colonial powers, and they have all the land. And then in 1994, once apartheid ends under Nelson Mandela, then the government starts buying back the land from the white people, from the white farmers, and then selling it to black people. And so you had black people owning land at about, I think, 13 or 14% in 1994 at the end of apartheid, and by like 2015, that was about 27% of land that they owned. And that was the government buying back the land from the white farmers who had taken it through conquest and then redistributing it to black people in South Africa. Well, now, and you understand what happens in the course of 20 years where you go from white people have very benevolently given up control of the government and decided to embrace equality and embrace pluralism, and everybody gets a vote and everybody gets a say, and we de-escalate. It only takes about 25 years now for the situation to completely reverse. And now what you see happening is the Black African National Congress, the ruling party in South Africa, is saying that, well, you know, this is really not good enough. This is taking too long, and we need to appease our black constituents who are in the majority. So now instead of buying the land back in a way that is legal, in a way that is civil, in a way that is peaceful, now we're just going to start taking it. We're just going to start forcefully removing it, and now there is this incredible racial animosity because, of course, you know, and the media tries to spin it into a purely economic issue, purely about the structure of the economy, that, oh, well, it is arbitrary that that white people own the farms. It's of course just simply about land and the economy. Well, no. It's also about the fact that you have this uneasy relationship between former colonial slaves and colonial masters. And so there is that element to it that not only are they thinking about land reform, well, it's also about how do we appease black constituents. And now there's this perception of inequality that derives from historical wrongdoing. So you have, or previously they were buying back the land. Now they're saying, well, we're going to consider taking the land. And in the process, as they've discussed these reforms, particularly they've been discussing amendments to their constitution where they would put in place that they would just take the land without compensation. As that discussion has been going on, you see that criminals now are actually just going in and killing white farmers. And that's not sanctioned by the government, but it is encouraged by the government. And when the government is having those conversations saying, well, should we just steal their land? Should we take it? You know, and they're singing these folk songs about killing the Boer, killing the white farmers. Well, it does create this culture where now you've emboldened people that now, whether it is the government officially or it's not the government officially, you have people that are going in, committing these horrible murders, killing people who own the farms, taking their property, taking their wealth. And really that's the situation that we're looking at right now.